She was interrupted right in the middle of her translation. In front of an entire city council, they told her to stay out of politics. 3 months later, that same council stood up because she was sworn in as their mayor. They once thought she was just the interpreter. But that day, she didn't translate anyone else's dream. She stood up and wrote her own. Greenville wasn't a big city, but in city council meetings, it knew exactly when to stay silent, both at the right moments and the wrong ones. The gray stone city hall stood with its classical dome in the center of town, where all official decisions were made. That Tuesday was the first of the month scheduled public session. By early morning, quiet figures had begun trickling in. Immigrant residents holding folders, local journalists adjusting mics, elderly women with watchful eyes, end of quote, and a few skeptical young men leaning against the wall. Among them, Leila Rami arrived at 9:58 a.m. exactly on time, as always. She didn't wear heels. She didn't wear a power blazer. There was nothing on her that screamed authority. She wore a crisp white blouse, gray slacks, and her dark hair was pulled back in a simple silver clip that didn't catch the light. She carried only a neatly organized folder and a stillness that didn't ask for permission. No one paid her much attention, but those who knew her had once dismissed her watched quietly. Leila walked to a small corner desk on the left side of the chamber where the translation mic, headphones, and 3 language guides were neatly arranged: English, Arabic, Spanish. She opened her folder, put on the headset, adjusted the volume. No expression, no rush. She looked as if she'd been sitting in that spot long before the meeting began, or maybe since the room was built. She sat down and waited. 9:04 a.m. The double oak doors opened again. Harold Green entered slow, deliberate steps, tailored suit, and a tight-lipped smile that belonged on someone walking toward a swearing-in podium. He shook a few hands, clapped a young aide's back, and cast a quick glance toward the interpreter's desk. "She's still the one?" he murmured to his assistant. The voice wasn't loud, but the message landed. No one replied. He didn't wait. He adjusted his cuff and made his way to the council chair as if it had always been his. Perhaps it had. In the public rows, a Syrian grandmother sat beside her daughter. Her hands trembled slightly around a thick folder. The 16-year-old beside her clasped her mother's hand. Everything was still. But something was shifting beneath the surface, like a wave swelling before anyone notices. The gavel struck wood. "Let's begin," Green said, his voice steady and clear, carrying just a hint of eagerness he didn't bother to hide. The meeting began with routine agenda items: budget, business permits, public works approvals. All followed protocol until Green proposed something new. "Fellow council members," he said, "I'd like to propose an adjustment to our public comment procedure specifically for residents who require translation. We've been spending far too much time on extended interpretation. In the interest of efficiency, I propose we limit translated comments to 90 seconds total." Leila didn't look up. She kept taking notes. But at the back of the room, someone blinked like they'd just recognized something very old resurfacing. "This isn't about discrimination," Green continued. "We simply want to ensure that every citizen's voice is delivered clearly, directly, in our shared language. Because, let me be clear, American identity cannot be translated." He said it while looking directly at Leila. She looked up. No expression, no flinch. The first speaker that day was the elderly Syrian woman. Her voice was soft, trembling, but her meaning was unwavering. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said in Arabic. "I just want to say, I live here, I pay taxes, I raise my children here, and I believe this city can belong to us, just as we've tried to belong to it." Leila translated slowly, clearly, nothing more, nothing less. Green interrupted. "Leila, just do your part," he said, his voice cutting through the session, calm, but coated in authority that assumed itself. "No need for commentary, just translate." No one responded, but several glances shifted, not because they thought Leila was wrong, but because something had just been exposed too clearly to ignore and too familiar to deny. Leila didn't reply, but something flickered in her eyes like steel newly sharpened, still sheathed, but ready. Someone nearby whispered, "That's the woman who helped my mother get her residency papers last year." Another looked toward the bulletin board outside the chamber where an old photo hung. Leila handing a citizenship certificate to an elderly Haitian man. The lighting in the picture was dull, but her smile was clear. The meeting continued. Then came a father from El Salvador. "I'm not good with words," he admitted, "but I have to speak." He shared how his 8-year-old daughter was denied enrollment after he'd filed the wrong school form. His voice cracked. "I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking to be heard." Leila began to translate. Midway, Green raised a hand. "Thank you," he said. "We'll handle the interpretation later. It's not needed right now." The air in the room didn't fall silent, it sank heavy. Leila set down her pen, removed her headset. At the back of the room, a young woman with brown skin and coiled hair raised her phononot to live stream, just to record, like a memory that needed proof. Green continued reading the next item. His eyes didn't lift, his tone steady, but no one was listening anymore. Leila sat up straighter. Her hands rested on the folder, but her gaze had moved beyond the room somewhere past the silence, behind the stairs that didn't know where to look anymore. She looked like someone who already knew someone would rise, but this time it would be her. No one noticed when she slipped a sealed envelope from her folder. She didn't open it. She simply placed it beneath the bilingual mic. Inside was the official certification from the Greenville City Election Commission. It named her Leila Rami, winner. Not by outcry, not by shouting, but by vote. The meeting adjourned at 11:42 a.m. People left in silence, but not the same silence they came with. It was the silence of something beginning uncertain, but irreversible. Leila was the last to rise. She packed her headset, folded her notes, slid the envelope into the pocket of her white blouse. She looked at no one. She didn't say goodbye. But before she walked out, she paused at the threshold where sunlight pooled across the marble. She didn't speak, but everyone who had ever interrupted her suddenly remembered every word she had once translated. That day, Leila didn't interpret anyone else's voice. And after that, they finally began to listen. The morning after the council meeting, City Hall hosted a public workshop on immigration policy. Under a banner that read, "Stronger Together," rows of chairs were neatly arranged. Cookies lined up, bottled water chilled. Harold Green was present just like every time the cameras were. He was listed as keynote speaker. Leila Rami was there too. No one invited her. No one introduced her. She sat in the third row aisle seat, a small notebook on her lap, a black ink pen in hand. Green took the podium. He spoke about budgets, priorities, about how native-born residents must come first in accessing city services. Leila said nothing, but when Green asked, "Any questions?" she raised her hand. Not high, not fast, just deliberate. He skipped her. A young woman stood from the back row. "She speaks 3 languages, she said, pointing at Leila. "Why won't you let her answer that?" Green smiled. "She's not on the speaker list," he replied, and moved on. The question had already been asked. But he was no longer the only one people looked to for answers. The next day, a 17-second clip spread through community group chats. Leila, being interrupted mid-translation, her eyes lowered, her hand still holding the pen. She didn't react. She didn't need to. That look, people started remembering it. One day later, a petition appeared. "We don't want our mother tongue cut off halfway." 3,000 signatures in 48 hours. A group of students from East Side High where Latinx residents were the majority wrote a letter. "We want to tell our family's story in the language we dream in." Behind closed doors, Green placed a newspaper on the table. "She didn't even do anything," he muttered. "She just sat there and made me look like the racist." An aide, eyes still on his laptop, replied, "Maybe that's because you are." Silence followed, but the room didn't feel the same. Riverside High hosted a forum, Citizenship and Voice. Harold Green, Invited guest. Leila Rami, keynote speaker. When her name was called, students clapped. Not loud, but long. Green sat in the front row. Unmentioned. He adjusted his tie, folded his arms. Leila walked up. No flash, no documents, just that notebook, that black pen. I once interpreted for an elderly woman, she said. She didn't speak English, but her eyes, her hands, her breath, they told a whole life. That day, I realized I wasn't translating language. I was translating dignity. No applause. Just stillness. Green stood and left, citing a schedule conflict. In the hallway, a student stopped him. 16. School hoodie. Phone still recording. Did you hear her? The boy wasn't rude. Just real. Or did you just come here to speak? Green froze. Mouth parted. Then closed. The boy didn't wait. The backlash. Next morning, Green spoke on local radio. His tone? Controlled. I don't have anything against Miss Rami, he said. But I believe a mayor must understand American values. And English is part of that. The interview lasted 7 minutes. But only one sentence went viral. On the community forum, someone dug up a quote from 2 years earlier, when Green commented on Leila's earlier run for city council. I respect culture, he'd said. But no one wants a leader who needs a translator to understand the Constitution. Leila didn't respond. But her team started reposting old photos. Leila teaching a citizenship class at the library. Helping an elderly Thai woman apply for housing. Leila standing in a schoolyard, kids running around her. In one short video, a Mexican grandmother smiled and said, "She doesn't speak fancy. She lives well." At the city policy conference, both Green and Leila were present. She stood by a map showing food delivery zones, calmly explaining in both English and Spanish to small business reps. Green approached, smiling. Miss Rami, I hear you're expanding outreach. Leila turned, shook his hand. Firm, brief. Not outreach, Mr. Green, she said. I'm part of the community. A camera clicked. The photo captured one frame. Green smiling, just enough. Leila standing tall, eyes straight ahead, not flinching. Green's office, quiet, weekend. He rewatched the student forum. Leila's voice. I don't need people to understand my language. I need them to understand me. He rewound. 3 times. Still didn't speak. Outside, students were laughing in the plaza. They took photos with Leila. One small child gave her a flag. An aide entered. Do you want to revise next week's campaign? Green stared at the screen. Then finally said, but I think I need to listen to how I've been speaking. Greenville, Tuesday morning, last week of the month. A quiet line had already formed outside City Hall. Under a row of flags, the breeze gently lifted the small paper ones held by residents. Inside the chamber, journalists were setting up. Cameras waited for signal. A sealed envelope sat in the clerk's hands, neat, weighted, holding more than just a name. It was the day they'd announced the new mayor. Green arrived early, one hand straightening his collar, the other clutching a travel mug. The doors opened. Leila walked in. No entourage, no cameras. Just her white blouse, black trousers, and a steady stride. Green glanced at her. No nod, no words. But he stepped half a pace back. 11 to 6 a.m. The chamber was packed. The last person slipped in just in time. The council clerk opened the envelope. Her voice wavered but held. The new mayor of Greenville, for the term 2024 to 2028. Nobody breathed. Is Miss Leila Rami. The entire room froze. A chair scraped softly against the floor. Something small dropped Green's pen. The elderly Syrian woman, the one Green once cut off mid-sentence, raised her hand to her mouth. Her daughter whispered, "Told you, Mom." Leila walked up to the podium. Not fast, not slow, no thunderous applause, but everyone stood. She didn't look at Green. She didn't look at anyone in particular, but her eyes swept every corner of the chamber, as if every panel of wood had once heard her voice cut short. Then she spoke. For the first time in English. No interpretation. No repeats. You've heard me translate the dreams of others. Today, I stand here to translate my own. Some believed I should only stand at the margins to listen. But I wasn't born to stand beside. I was born to step forward and invite others to follow. Some said, I don't speak English clearly. I don't need to speak clearly if you understand what I've done. Someone held their breath. Someone else bowed their head. I didn't run to represent the immigrant community. I ran because I am part of this city, and because that part has been silent for too long. Sunlight streamed through the glass behind her. She didn't shine. She stood out. History doesn't belong to those who speak the loudest. She paused. It belongs to those who stand firm, even when no one is listening. Eyes glistened. Heads lowered. Green sat in the front row. His fists clenched. At moments, his eyes searched past Leila toward a back wall where no one stood. She ended her speech with a single sentence, not loud, but so steady no one dared interrupt. I didn't change the game. I just refused to play by their rules. She stepped down. As she passed Green, he stood. No one asked him to. No one said, stand up. But when she walked by, he couldn't not. She said nothing. But when their eyes met, something passed. No sound. No translation. It had been said. 1 week later, Leila signed her oath of office before the community. Inside the city's new cultural center, portraits of Greenville's civil rights leaders lined the hallway. Leila's photo, holding a Yemeni child in her arms, was hung next to one of Martin Luther King Jr. marching. Below it, a quote read, "We cannot walk alone, and as we walk we must pledge that we shall always march forward." Green attended the dedication. He didn't sit in front. He stood, quiet, in the crowd. Leila gave a short speech. No mention of him. No allusions. But when she read the quote aloud, she didn't look at MLK's photo. She looked directly into the crowd. And Green knew that line wasn't for him to remember. It was for him to begin learning. A week later, Green sat alone in his old office. The desk was empty, the flag taken down. Through the window, he saw Leila, guiding a group of immigrant students through City Hall. She didn't raise her voice, just pointed, explained, let the kids listen. Green placed a hand on the empty desk. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to control the noise. He noticed something that had always been there, but he'd never learned to see it. He replayed Leila's inauguration speech. The final words echoed, "I didn't change the game. I just refused to play by their rules." He opened a drawer, pulled out an envelope. No address. Inside, a single handwritten note, blue ink, sharp pen. "Leila, I was wrong. But maybe it's not too late to relearn how to listen." No need to reply. Harold Green, Monday morning. City Hall opened early. Leila passed the marble benches where a line of school children waited to tour. A little girl looked up and asked softly, "Are you the one they used to cut off?" Leila smiled. "I used to translate other people's dreams. And now? Now I write them. No drumroll. Just a single knock. Right where the voice had once been blocked. And then it opened. Some people get interrupted their entire lives. Not because they have nothing to say, but because others aren't ready to listen. But once they stand up, no one can silence them again. If this story reminded you of a time you were overlooked, share it. If you've ever seen someone step out of the shadows and write their own dream, tell someone. And if you believe every voice deserves to be fully heard, hit subscribe so we can keep telling stories like this together. We cannot walk alone, but once we do walk, let us never walk the old way again. And if one day you rise to speak, may the world fall quiet, just long enough to hear you, the way you deserve.